One of the ideas that was harmful that he was supposed to counteract is the idea that God is angry at you and condemns you and judges you. That he said that this is a total affront to the character of God, who is love itself. He traveled these places that he called heaven, and they're full of everything that's beautiful and good. And he traveled these places that are called hell. They're full of everything that's scary and gruesome. But everybody who's in those places chose to be there. Hell is not a place of punishment that's run by God. It's just like the natural extension of, I said before, in heaven, the surroundings, that everything, the atmosphere is a reflection of who you are inside. So it can be in hell.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everybody. So wonderful to have you here today, and it is fantastic to have my guest, Curtis Childs. Hello, Curtis.
Hello. Excited to start the conversation back up again.
Yes, we had a great conversation, and anybody watching, I urge you at some point, go back and listen to part 1. But you can also stay here because we're kind of moving on to new topics. But basically, Curtis has studied and teaches about a person called Emanuel Swedenborg, who traveled into the afterlife, and he wrote extensively on this, and this was in the 1700s. Curtis, we were just talking about the levels of heaven. So what are the levels of heaven? What is that all about?
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. I would say to anyone who's just dropping into this and isn't familiar with who Swedenborg is, I would say the reason that I've put out 1,600 videos on YouTube about just his experiences, because they totally changed my life. They made my life better in every way. And it feels like, oh, I've discovered this source of truth and healing, and I feel like I've got to try to share it with people. So that's what's motivating me to be here. Yeah, the levels of heaven. The fascinating thing about Swedenborg, because he had such long experiences and because he was so brilliant and accomplished, he was used to writing things down really thoroughly. So he was known throughout Europe at the time for having written this Principia, where he talked about, I think it was about anatomy, and he was so used to writing big long books where he got a bunch of complex information and synthesized it. And he did the same thing about the afterlife, which is so fascinating. And so you get all this detail about not just what it feels like to be in the afterlife or the experience, but the underlying mechanics, the E equals MC squared of the afterlife. So the levels of heaven. So heaven is a state of mind. The whole spiritual world, which is we would call the afterlife, is really impacted by consciousness, what you feel, what you think, what you love, what you believe. That has a huge impact there, and it impacts where you travel in the afterlife. So here, traveling is like physical locomotion. You push your foot off something, you move your physical body forward. There, your love takes you to where you go. So there's these levels of heaven, which are levels of opening of the human mind. Let me explain a little bit of what he means there. There's levels in everything. You just look around. The human body is levels. You can study an organ. You can say, I'm going to look at the lungs, and I'm going to look at them as an organ and think about how they expand and contract and where they are in the body and what their function is. That's one level. But then you can zoom in and study tissues. You can look at them at the tissue. Think about cranking up your magnification on them, and you're looking at the tissues. And the tissues, they behave in their own way. It's a bunch of different cells interacting together. So that's level 2. Level 3 would be you just zoom into one individual cell. And there's all these things in there that you did. There's mitochondria, there's ribosomes, and there's endoplasmic reticulum, whatever else is in there. That's like what the levels of heaven are. So if you have your mind opened on the first level, it's like, just in general, you've opened up to what heaven's trying to give you, to love and truth. The second level is like all your different tissues of your mind are open. So all the components are open. The third level is like every little thing everywhere is alive and vibrant. So it's just like the saturation of sort of divine energy has gotten deeper and deeper into there. So if you go into the afterlife and you've got the first level open in your mind, we open the levels here while we're in the world. That's what spiritual growth is. You got the first level open, then you need to be in the first level of heaven, because actually to go up higher, would not be pleasant. It would actually be uncomfortable, and even he says painful. So he compares it to like if you want to say I want to go climb Mount Everest, you can't just go do that. You have to spend so long training and getting used to the altitude and the endurance needed. You gotta even experienced climbers have to go like halfway up to base camp and level off in some way. So that's what it is for heaven. So you may not be that much love you can't handle right now, which sounds funny, but to him it's just very precise. So the first level of heaven is where you're thinking pretty practically about, okay, I know what it is to be a good person, so I'll do what I'm supposed to do. And that's kind of the obedience level. Like I'm supposed to do this, so I'll do it. The higher levels are when you start to love to do what's right. So the second level is really when you begin to love the truth. So the spiritual principles, that way of life, you start to love it and you follow it because you know it's true. But the third level is the love level. And that's where you're just motivated by love for people. So that is where the knowing that what I don't even have to think about why or why not. I just go and do what's right. So generally you find people on each of these levels that there's infinite variety across. There's so many people in each level. It's not like they're actually stacked on top of each other like a sandwich. It's more like you'd find a mountain in the afterlife, and around the base of the mountain would be living people in the first level, and sort of halfway up or in the hills would be people of the second level. Up at the peak would be people of the third level. So it's all integrated, but there's really the difference is what's going on in the hearts and minds of different people at these different levels.
And it's our actions here on earth which sends us to the different levels.
Absolutely. People are like, well, why do we have to, if heaven's so great, why do we have to be here in the world? But it's important. It's just like if you can't be a person in this world without spending this 9 months in the womb, because the womb's, it's how it needs to be. It's enclosed. It's safe. You need for everything, all the little development that's going on in there. You need to have that space. This world is like the womb of the afterlife. And it has the characteristics that let us choose what kind of person we want to be and open up our levels. So yeah, what we do now is setting the right foundation for us to have a happy time in the afterlife.
In part one, you mentioned that he had some sort of an interaction with God that was pretty incredible. Can you tell us about that?
In that time in Europe, the church and the state, the same thing, everything very Christian. Lutheran was the Sweden at the time. His father was a bishop. So Swedenborg, he had like he thinks there's a God and he would pray and things, but really was focused on science. But then as he started to have these experiences, we began to have, as I said before, he recorded these dreams he was having and started to see the spiritual world more. At some point in a pub in London, he was in a pub in London and he had this vision of God, and he would say, Jesus Christ, like a person of God appeared in front of him. And the funny thing is that at one point, there's sort of two experiences, but I'll say that one of the first things out of God's mouth to Swedenborg was, do you have a clean bill of health? And that was an inside joke almost. So when Swedenborg was younger, he had jumped ship. So there was back in the day, the plague would break out on ships. And that phrase is because if you pull into the harbor and they know there's some kind of sickness on your ship, no one's allowed to leave the ship till you get a bill of health saying that you're not going to infect the city. But Swedenborg was young, sort of a hot shot. And he's like, I'm just going to leave and go into the city. And he got caught. And that is something you could be put to death for. So because he didn't have the bill of health. So then here comes God, and he shows up and says, do you have a clean bill of health? And what Swedenborg understands that to mean is like, you're about to go on this journey. How's your spiritual health? Like all the things that then he had to work on, like his ego, his love, materialism, that was sort of a reference to that. But he said it was a very loving encounter. He talked later about, sort of being like a child, like in the lap of God and God looking down and smiling. He doesn't go into a ton of detail about it, but he believed that in that God told him, I need you to go explore the afterlife and write these books so that people are like losing their connection to this whole thing. People don't understand what's going on. So I need you to open this up for people and to counteract some of the harmful religious ideas that were in Swedenborg's world in the day. So that's where he got his mission. But it stayed with him. That totally directed the course of everything he did, and formed his connection to God that he said stayed with him. That it was a sort of like now they were linked in a way that he had never been before.
It's interesting because I've heard this with other near-death experiencers, that they sat in the lap of God, which you don't really expect for an adult, but it happens again and again.
Yes. And you think about Swedenborg as this, like, he's a 55-year-old guy with like a nobleman with a curly wig and a overcoat. You picture that. And he's just like this little baby looking up at the face of God. I would do that. I want to do that. Like, I feel like that sometimes, like I need to just get held and cradled. So I think that to him, that was an important experience of starting to understand how much God loves everyone. And that is a theme that absolutely permeates his works everywhere, is that God is complete love. One of the ideas that was harmful that he was supposed to counteract is the idea that God is angry at you and condemns you and judges you, that he said that this is a total affront to the character of God, who is love itself, is wisdom itself. That I think opened his eyes in a way that stuck with him through the rest of it.
And it's interesting because while you say that, he did, though, visit hell, didn't he, at some point? And what is that all about then?
So, yeah, his most popular book is called Heaven and Hell. And actually, he wrote that. He started publishing all his books anonymously. This was not his field. He didn't want the credit for it, but also he felt like lending his name to books on spiritual experiences wouldn't do anything for it. But people started to figure out who it was. And so once he had kind of been outed, then he wrote this book, Heaven and Hell, which was just focused on the spiritual, more on the spiritual experiences, because before it was very like, it was dense and theological, and really, I love it. But he was trying to give people this window in. So Heaven and Hell, yes. Heaven is a state of mind and hell is a state of mind. Nobody has to go to either one. You go where you love. That afterlife is you go do what you love to do. So heaven, he defines it at one point, is that hell is the pleasure you find in harming other people. And heaven is the pleasure you find in doing something good for other people. We experience these different, he called hell the pleasures of insanity. So if you're on the road and somebody cuts you off and you're just like, I'm going to kill them. And you, or somebody insults you and there is a certain, I want to get revenge on them. I want to crush them for doing, that's what hell is. He said that's what hellfire is. So in the afterlife, what you love draws you toward people who love the same kinds of things as you. And what you love is determined by what you spend your life doing and what you send your energy, what you make your days composed of. So he traveled these places that he called heaven, and they're full of everything that's beautiful and good. And he traveled these places that are called hell. They're full of everything that's scary and gruesome. But everybody who's in those places chose to be there because there'd be some hells that are like the hells of revenge. So people who love revenge and don't care about the impact they're having on people, they gravitate toward each other and continue to have this insatiable desire to inflict harm. There's all kinds of hells that are like that. So God doesn't send you to hell, but God is love. I'm just saying that God is the love of everyone, and the truth that I'm no better than you, you're no better than me. What we're supposed to do is help each other. If you've based your life around the opposite, harming people, exploiting them, whatever, you don't want to be anywhere near that. You don't want to be anywhere near that. So you want to get away from that. So people in hell, to them, they think this is the life I want. He actually interviews people from hell at the end of one of his books. He's like, forgive me for adding this to fill out the rest of the page. Because back then paper was expensive. You weren't supposed to print blank pages. But he says, 2 spirits from hell came up to me. He talked to plenty of people who were in hell, some people who he knew in his life. And he said, 2 spirits came up to me. And they said, you've written a lot about what you've seen in heaven. Write something from us too. And what they didn't say was, help us, let us out of hell. We're being tormented here. They're basically trying to pitch hell to people. They were saying, look, everybody in heaven loves each other so much, and they say that that's great, but we have things we enjoy too. And they went on to list, like, we love vengeance and lying and slandering and cheating and adultery, all these things. And to us, that's what's fun. And Swedenborg was saying, don't you care about the harm that does? And they say, well, don't be a square, basically. Like, we like that stuff. So the fact is, God loves everybody, and even people in hell. The unceasing effort of God is to try to give you the happiest life you can have. But if the stuff that makes you happy is stuff that's destructive to the people around you, there has to be limits placed on what you're allowed to do, because you can't go and just if you want to go kill people, you can't just. We don't want to get killed, so we have to So the hell is kind of this. It's a place where you can live the happiest life you can if you're loving all these terrible things. So it's not you don't want to go there. It's a downgrade of everything that's good. But it's there, and it's an option. So it is this funny, it's this funny mix of, yes, it's heaven and hell, like you heard in Christianity. However, they're pretty different than is described there, because hell is not a place of punishment that's run by God. It's just like the natural extension of, I said before, in heaven, the surroundings, that everything, the atmosphere is a reflection of who you are inside. So it can be in hell. If I'm sitting there and nursing these horrendous thoughts against other people, and I'm hurting them, dominating, exploiting them. He said that the sort of the core of hell is the love of dominating other people just so you can be above them. Then everything in hell looks like that. Like, it looks terrible, and it looks ugly, and it's sort of an effigy of that. Although, he says, people in hell don't really see it that way, because your perspective is so warped, and God is just trying to make it so you don't live this life surrounded by everything. So to them, everything looks pretty normal. But if the light of heaven shines in, you can see this is bad. This is pretty bad. So there's a little bit on the peculiar nature of the hell that he describes.
So it seems from what you're describing that if you could reform yourself, you could go to a higher level. But it seems like if you're there, it'd be pretty hard to change, because you're just surrounded by so much of that negativity.
Some I talked before. I think in the first conversation, I talked about angels, which is just what he calls people. He calls people who are in heaven angels. People who are in hell, he calls them evil spirits. And people who are kind of not yet decided, he calls them just spirits. But some of the jobs of angels is to be in hell and mitigating harm and trying to lead people to. You kind of go down and you're like, okay, no, you're trying to torture this person. We're not going to let you, and we're going to try to steer you away from getting worse. But it's. I think nobody goes to hell like by accident. You have to really want it. There's this constant pull of God out of that, but he can't stop you if you say, no, I want the pleasure of that, and I will just throw everything else away for it. But it's not like God is like, okay, well, you did it. Now I'm out of here. That's his child. That, like, whoever's down there, God loves them the same as he loves any of us. So it's like, I know he's got to be hatching some plans or something to somehow eventually we'll do something with it. But yeah, that the unceasing effort of God always is to try to make your life better in whatever way you'll let the divine do that.
It's interesting because it reminds me of some things that some near-death experiencers are saying, that we're going through this shift and society is almost splitting in two. And I often see that because there are people that watch your channel and my channel, and I know I converse with them in the comments and so forth, and they're just so kind and they're so loving. And I know people, that I'm surrounded by, some of my friends, who they're just such genuine people and really loving. But then I'll go on social media sometimes, and people so easily spew negativity. And I do see that too in my comments. And it always surprises me, because this channel is, talking about how important love is and kindness and so forth. But do you kind of see that in society too, where we're splitting, or did Swedenborg address that at all?
I said heaven's connected to you all the time, right? There's always angels with you. Hell's connected to you too. There's an equilibrium that we have to be in. He talked about this a lot, that in order for us to be conscious and to be human, which is the same thing as to say be free, you have influences from heaven. Angels are trying to steer you toward what's good, but your own kind of selfishness, the dark side of you, draws influences from hell to you. So you really, it's not the exact same as like the angel and the devil on the shoulder from cartoons, but if you just go through your day, heaven and hell are in your ear all the time. You could just tell. Like I have this. Why did I think that really nasty thought about this person? Why did I get this rage toward this? Oh, why did I think that lovely thought about this person? Every one of us is making the choice, heaven or hell. Which one do we want to do today? Which one do we want to bring more of into the world? And the more that you're choosing hell, the more hell your spirit kind of moves toward hell. So you get more and more influence from hell. The more you're choosing heaven, your spirit kind of moves toward heaven, and hell is sort of relegated to the outside. So everybody in society is making that choice every day. But you never know. You never know for sure the state of anyone's spirit. Definitely, since I got on YouTube, people will sometimes make really nasty comments toward me, but you don't know why they did it. And actually, nobody can know. Swedenborg talked about you can make civil judgments, but you can't make spiritual judgments. So a civil judgment might be in the context of YouTube comments. Somebody is coming on and they're attacking me. They're attacking all the other people in the comments. They're attacking my guests. And what it's doing is ruining the mood, is ruining the vibe, and people are scared to comment. So maybe I say, I have a judgment that you can't be here, so I'm blocking you from the channel. That's a civil judgment. What I can't do is a spiritual judgment and say, I know that you're doing that for evil reasons, or I know that you have, that you're a bad person, because you don't know. He even talks about how angels can look at 100 different people could perform the same action, but it's actually 100 different things spiritually. So somebody might write a comment just because they're kind of ignorant about the harm that it causes, or somebody might have had some kind of trauma or somebody's just like, they're kind of brainless and don't realize their impact. Whereas other people, you can get caught in this loop of like, yeah, I want to go and try to hurt someone's feelings. And I feel that sometimes in myself. I always think being somebody on YouTube, and I'm like, who are these people? Why would you ever go and comment on somebody that, but I've a couple times when I see something on YouTube that I feel like that's a bad message. They're harming the world through that. And I get this impulse to go write a nasty comment. I have not done it, but I can suddenly see like, oh yeah, there's hell is like wanting me to get in there. So I don't know. And I think you can apply that to society at large. I can have a sense of, okay, it seems like this particular idea is kind of coming out of hell. It seems like this one's coming out of heaven, but I don't know for sure. So I can make civil judgments. I can say, I don't want that in my feed, but I don't know for sure. But Swedenborg does talk about judgments. The judgments are this thing that can happen on a grand scale, which is like a reordering. So Swedenborg says there was a really big one in the years around when he was writing his books. He said in the year 1757, there was this massive restructuring of the spiritual world, and that actually created this new sort of freedom in the way people feel and think, which, now we'd look back and see that's kind of when technology and human rights and everything exploded out from there. The judgment is just things get to a point where they've got to be fixed. So you see this if you're I'll give a stupid metaphor, but if your kitchen it's just got so out of date and then a few things break and you're like, all right, that's it. We have to redo the kitchen. Like you can live with it, but then something's got to give. Same things happen with human society, both here and in the spiritual world. And everything here is downstream, according to Swedenborg, from the spiritual world. So all the things that are happening in society, everyone's getting divided. That's not just us. That we feel the effects of what's happening in the spiritual world. So there's something going on there as well. That because remember that world influences our thoughts and feelings. So I always try to look at things through a couple of principles of divine providence that Swedenborg laid out. So divine providence is a name he gives to. He says that that God or the divine. This is how God guides the world. And there's a couple of laws of it that he sets out. It says that divine providence always leads things to a good end, no matter what the appearance of the means. So if you take it to your individual life, you can get into this state that he called the stream of providence, which is not where only good things happen in your life, but where you believe that whatever happens to me right now, it's going to turn out okay. And actually, this is going to contribute more to my happy state eventually. So let's say I had some kind of financial hardship that shakes up my life and changes, or let's say I had some big project I was working on that failed. Well, that you don't necessarily know at the time, but that changes who you are. That introduces some humility. Sometimes, often in those moments, we have to kind of like, I need help from a higher power, and you kind of start to believe that that's real. It humbles you. It changes the way you see other people. I know for me, when I go through big bouts of suffering, definitely after, I'm more compassionate towards people because I understand a little bit more where they're going. So to him, divine providence is always working to bring good out of things, even if you can't tell at the time. You can tell when you look back on your life. Sometimes you can see, oh, actually, that was good. I didn't get the thing I wanted then because it led me to here. For example, before I was doing spiritual stuff on YouTube, I didn't think that was going to be my job. I wanted to be a basketball player or a musician. Like those were when I was little, I thought I could play basketball, but I couldn't. And then when I got older, I was like, I want to be a rock star. But there was a couple of that didn't work out, and I'm actually glad. Like I like this better. But I never would have thought I wanted to do this. But you don't know. Like there's a plan. So that's the same thing with society. You can kind of look back and say, these things happen, these terrible things, even wars. But we learned something. We've changed. People are resolute to not let it happen again. So we understand better the challenges we face. That's happening all the time. Even in society, there's a plan, and it's all moving toward something good. Swedenborg did say that on the horizon, there's going to be an era of peace and prosperity and joy for the human race. He called it the new church. And to him, church didn't just mean like a church, like an individual organization, or even like something like the Christian church. A church is an era of spiritual belief for humankind. So he says the new church is going to be this thing where you kind of get back to, there's a more open communication with heaven, and love comes more easily. So that's coming, but it's going to take a little while to get there.
Oh my gosh, I have so many more things to ask you, and I know we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask you if you can tell this briefly, and I don't know if you can, but did he see anything other than humans, like beings from other planets that were also there?
He sure did. Actually, we just did a show about this pretty recently. That he says that he called everyone human. So he absolutely said that as soon as you get into heaven, it's common knowledge that there are people here from planets other than Earth. But he called them all human, even though he talks about them having they're all sort of like people, but some of them are a little shorter or differently formed or smaller head or something. But to him, they're all the human race. And the reason why is they all have as I said before, like a will and an intellect, so that you can love things and you can know things. And actually, you need to have people from different planets, because different planets produce different kinds of minds and hearts. And that heaven, I said before, that heaven is like the human form. So just like the human form has a heart that needs to circulate all the blood through it, there's some part of heaven, there's like a group of angels or big communities of angels that are like the heart of heaven. So something they do with the love that they have spreads that out to everyone else in heaven. There's something like the elbow or the arm of heaven. He talks about there's certain angels that have power to protect and to do things. And that's like the arm. Like for us, that's what we do things with. There's all these different parts. And you need, for the human body, you need all these different substances. The keratin in your fingernails is a lot different than the neurons in your brain. And so you need people even from different planets, because some people, he talked about actually people that are not from Earth are often a lot less superficial than we are. And he talked about certain spirits that are from other planets that make up sort of like the memory functions in the brain. So you need all these different kinds of people in order to have heaven work. Just like you need all these different substances and organs and organelles and things to make the human body work. So yes, that was another of his wild claims, is that, oh yeah, you get there and it's there's people from many planets, but we're all one big human family.
I love that. I also love too about you, Curtis, is, I listened to several videos as I prepared for this, and you were talking in one of them about, the integrity and the responsibility you feel as a messenger. And I appreciate that. I know you are sharing this with such good intentions and wanting to help people. I know people are going to want to connect with you too. So tell us more about your channel and your website and your organization.
Sure. Yeah. I work for the Swedenborg Foundation, which is a not-for-profit. It's actually 170 years old. What it primarily had done for a long time is just keep Swedenborg's books in print, so and translate them. So now we have a mission statement now of we're trying to foster an increasingly broad conversation around the ideas of Emanuel Swedenborg. So because, like I said, I think these ideas can help the conversation and help the world. So we have a website, which is swedenborg.com. If you go there, there's actually free ebook downloads or free PDF downloads of a lot of Swedenborg's books. If you want to find me and the videos, go to youtube.com/offtheLeftEye, which that is a phrase from one of Swedenborg's spiritual experiences where he talks about the dying process and what that's like and how it seemed like a covering was peeled off his left eye, which gave him the use of spiritual sight because left corresponds to intellect, which we can get into another time. But if you go to youtube.com/offtheLeftEye, or you just search Swedenborg on YouTube, there's not that many people talking about Swedenborg. You'll find us pretty quick. Come there. If you leave a comment on any of our videos or email to the website, we will talk to you. We'll get you anything you need, and we hope that the ideas can bring some of the help to you that they've brought to me and others on our team.
Curtis, what do you think is the most important takeaway you want people to have today?
I'm going to kind of put two together, but
Okay.
Everything's going to be okay, and enjoy being useful to people. That's the core of life. Everything's going to be okay, so that will relax you. And then notice when you enjoy doing good things for people and cultivate that and bank on that, because that's the essence of heaven.
I love that. Thank you so much, Curtis. I have so enjoyed this conversation with you. I've just loved connecting with you and hearing more about your studies and everything you're sharing with people.
Thanks. This has been so fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it. All right. You have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, that was really fun and so enlightening. I loved talking to Curtis. If you want to connect with him, I will have all of his links in the description, along with a link to part 1 if any of you didn't get a chance to watch that first. Plus, you can find all of my episodes there. But right now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on either the things we talked about in part 1 or some of the things we just talked about. I mean, he talked about God. He talked about aliens, which I thought was really interesting. And then also heaven and hell. So what stood out the most to you? Did anything, pop out like, wow, I didn't know that? Just share your thoughts in the comments. Anything you really enjoyed hearing about. I always love to hear what you have to say, and I do love connecting with you. So thank you for all of you that do that. And as I always say, if you just want to say, I made it, that is so helpful as well. Any kind of comment helps the channel, but I also really do enjoy connecting with each and every one of you. Thank you for your likes, everybody. Thank you for subscribing. If you have a friend who may like this channel, please spread the word. I would really appreciate that. You have a wonderful day. I'm so glad you joined me, and I do hope I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.